are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, going to be discussing a transfer portal player that I think the Wildcats could realistically go after. Now, should they pursue this transfer portal player that we are about to discuss? We'll get to that in a second. Also, Aaron Bradshaw, going to talk about him a little bit more. On a recent episode of the show, we discussed John Calipari's comments about where Bradshaw and Onyenso could play. He discussed a little bit about their play styles and how he believes that he may be able to play both of them, 7-footers, at the same time on the court. But Bradshaw, before the McDonald's All-American Game, made some interesting comments about where he believes that he will slide in for Cal, and it is, to me, honestly, shocking where he believes he will play for Kentucky. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everybody out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the show. We've got some great content coming out for you guys through the rest of the spring and throughout the summer. Probably going to talk about Kentucky baseball a little bit at some point here in the future if they continue to play the way that they're playing. I know a lot of people are excited about what the Wildcats are doing on the mound, but here today, I want to talk about a couple of different basketball-related topics. Kentucky obviously already active in the transfer portal before we even got to the SEC tournament. Kentucky had reached out to Chris Ledlum of Harvard. I'm sure they've reached out to several other players since then, but there's one guy in particular that I want to talk about today, and that's Jamarion Sharp. If you don't already know who Jamarion Sharp is, he is the tallest player in college basketball. Literally, he's taller than Zach Edey by an inch. He's 7'5", and he's been playing for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers for 2 seasons now. I think Kentucky basketball could realistically pursue this kid. Now, that's the question we want to answer on today's episode. Should they pursue this kid? In case you don't remember, Kentucky's actually played against Jamarion Sharp. I believe it was a little bit after, might have been a little bit before, the CBS Sports Classic last season. Kentucky played WKU. They won 95-60. Oscar Tshiebwe ended up playing pretty well in this game. If I'm not mistaken, he had, I want to say 28 rebounds, somewhere around there. Jamarion Sharp didn't have like an elite phenomenal performance. He had 8 points on 3 of 4 shooting. He was 2 of 3 from the foul line. He had 7 rebounds. No, he did have 6 rebounds, and he had 7 blocks in that game against Kentucky. Only 2 personal fouls, so he just didn't, and he only logged 25 minutes, so he just didn't really play as much as he normally did against the Wildcats on that day, and he was solid overall in his outing. Jamarion Sharp, though, I think could solve a couple of different problems that I think Kentucky fans have identified, and this coaching staff has identified, over the past couple of seasons with Oscar Tshiebwe. Oscar is a great rebounder. He's great in the post, I think, on the offensive end of the floor. I think he plays with a lot of passion, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, whatever word you may want to use there. But he was not good on defense. And he got caught out of position far too often. He got caught on pick and roll action, not where he needed to be, far too often. And I think having a guy like Jamarion Sharp, 7'5", 235 pounds, to maybe help you protect the rim a little bit better than you have in the past would be nice. Now, let's be very clear. Is Jamarion Sharp the most elite rim protector in the world? No. 7'5" doesn't always guarantee you that. Zach Edey, I think, was proof of this last year. He was solid all around, but he was not the most elite defender because with that size comes a little bit of clunkiness whenever you try and move around. Sharp, I think, would be a very valuable addition, though. 7.4 points, 7.7 rebounds. Like I mentioned, he had 7 blocks against Kentucky the last time, or the one time he faced off against them just a season ago. He averaged in total 7.8 points over the course of his career. That would be 4.4 blocks for Mr. Sharp over the course of his 2 seasons with the Hilltoppers. I think he does what Kentucky fans wanted out of the front court over the past couple of years. He gives you height. He gives you blocking, statistically. He gives you rim defense, I should say. and he doesn't turn the ball over. And he doesn't foul a lot either, which is really interesting. Only 2.3 fouls per game. So I think that Kentucky, if they really wanted to, could pursue Jamarion Sharp and end up getting him in what is now going to be, I think, a really interesting front court with Aaron Bradshaw. We'll talk about him later, but here's the problem with Sharp potentially coming to Kentucky. You've got 2 centers on roster already, right? I bet that's what all of you have been saying up until this point in the podcast for me, is that, well, Kentucky's already got 2 centers on roster. They've got Ugonna Onyenso and you've got Aaron Bradshaw. Here's the thing. We've heard the rumors. We don't know what's going to happen. If Kentucky does end up covering their bases, which I think they should, they will pursue a guy like Jamarion Sharp because we don't know if Ugonna Onyenso is going to stay. Now, I've said as much on probably, I think, the second most recent episode of this show. It might have been the most recent, talking about how I think Ugonna Onyenso is going to stay because Onyenso said he's looking forward to coming back next year. That's true. That's true. I still think he's going to stay. If he does not, and if there is any legitimate concern within that Kentucky program that Onyenso could leave, you have to start looking at options. Sure, you're bringing in one of the most talented recruiting classes that you've had. Sure, you're bringing in all these 5 stars, and you're bringing in Aaron Bradshaw. But you've got to have a backup plan. And while I may sit here and tell you, hey, I think Onyenso is going to stay, I don't know. You don't know. We don't know what Onyenso is going to do unless you're listening to this and your name is Ugonna Onyenso. So I think Kentucky, in preparation, should already be highlighting individual players in the portal that they want to reach out to. Maybe going ahead and reaching out to a couple of them, guys like Sharp. Because what was Onyenso, if he does decide to leave, the question needs to be asked, what was Onyenso for Kentucky in his sophomore year? Well, technically, he would have been the defensive rim protector at the 5 that Kentucky would have wanted to kind of grow him into that role and kind of polish himself offensively. I think Jamarion Sharp is that. He's that guy that can score at the rim, shooting 67% on his career, almost 68%. He would be that guy in the interior that could play the 5. And then whenever you want to rotate out lineups, you switch. You have Lance Ware at your 5. Maybe you have Bradshaw at your 5. Honestly, I think Ware would probably fit there more because of the versatility of Bradshaw, which we'll get to in just a second. But it would make sense from a rotation standpoint to bring in a guy like Sharp because I think that he would end up doing similar things, if not better, than Onyenso would. Now, let's go back to what I said a second ago. I don't think Onyenso's leaving. Let's be very clear. I don't want anybody in the comments to come to me and say, but you just said. I'm standing by that. I'm just saying in preparation in case somebody's wrong and Onyenso changes his mind and does decide that he wants to leave the Wildcats. You have to be ready for moments like this. In this transfer portal era where any player can leave on a whim, you have to be prepared. You have to be ready for things like this. So should Kentucky pursue Jamarion Sharp? I think it would be wise if they understand the situation with Onyenso and they think that there's an inkling of a possibility that he could leave. Which, as we discussed recently, I don't know why he would, but if there's an inkling, I think you could go after a guy like Sharp. So that's my thought on Jamarion Sharp. I think that would be a fun transfer portal addition. I think a lot of Kentucky fans would be excited about that. If you would be excited about that, or you think it would be bad to replace essentially Sharp or Onyenso with Sharp, you can leave it in the YouTube comments below. Or if you're listening on podcast, you can hit us on the socials at Locked On UK. All right, I want to get to Aaron Bradshaw's comments here because, whoa, Nelly, they are very, very interesting comments about where Aaron Bradshaw, the 7-footer, could play for the Kentucky Wildcats. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. The Final Four is almost here. The NCAA tournament's going on. The NBA is going on. There is no better time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers at FanDuel are getting a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000, and that's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net in the Final Four. That's all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. All you have to do is join at FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. You can make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Aaron Bradshaw, the five-star center for the Kentucky Wildcats in their 2023 recruiting class. I want to pull this up here for you guys real quick. And if you hear my keyboard going around, just give me a second here. So I want to pull this up so that we have the proper dimensions. Aaron Bradshaw, 7 feet tall, 210 pounds according to 24/7 Sports. Probably has a little bit more weight than that. It's the number one recruiting class in the country that the Wildcats have. And this is the number 4 player nationally, Aaron Bradshaw. Again, 7-footer, listed as a center, right? What did we discuss recently when talking about Bradshaw? If Kentucky does want to play the 2-center lineup, essentially play 2 7-footers, you could add some versatility with Bradshaw by playing him at the 4. According to Cal, according to Bradshaw, according to scouting reports, he is what you would call a new time big. At least that's what he's claimed himself to be. And I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. He can handle the ball. He has, I think, a versatile game offensively. And he just overall matches what you would think of whenever you think of modern big man, modern professional big man. The interesting thing about Aaron Bradshaw, with that in mind, coming to Kentucky, is that right now there are discussions being had about where he should play, right? Should he play at the 5 if he's that versatile? Should he play at the 4? We've talked about that recently. But John Calipari had some comments according to Bradshaw. Bradshaw made comments about Cal's comments, I think right before the McDonald's All-American game. I don't know if this was today. I don't know if this was yesterday, but he said, quote, and this is from KSR, Calipari told me I've got to stretch the floor. I'm not an old-time big. I'm a new-time big. I like to stretch the floor, shoot, and dribble. He just told me to stay consistent and be who you are. We mentioned it on yesterday's show about Aaron Bradshaw. There's a video of him going around on Twitter right now of him draining, I believe it was 7 threes in a row. The kid can shoot. The kid can knock him down. He also mentioned mentioned that he's the workhorse guy. He's the one that loves being in the gym. He loves being energetic. He loves kind of getting after it. He said, a direct quote here, I think I'm the perfect fit for a Kentucky freshman. So he is, I think, going to be a very valuable piece for the Wildcats. I thought at the 4. But here's the kicker. This is also in an article by KSR. I'll read what KSR says first, and then I'll read the quote. KSR says, Bradshaw says that Calipari is telling him he'll have to defend opposing guards in certain situations, possibly even moving up to a position or two to play the 3 or the 4. And then this is the quote from Bradshaw. Calipari said, I'm going to have to guard guards because I'm going to be a guard. I'm going to be the 3, 4. I'm going to have to guard fast people, strong people. I have to be ready for that, so I might as well start now. Pause and let that sink in. If that's true, this recruit that is now about to be at Kentucky claims that the head coach, John Calipari, says that he's going to, at 7 feet tall, potentially play the 3. Now, there may be some people out there that hear that and melt down. Actually, believe it or not, I'm reading it just now. KSR's article says as much. There may be some Kentucky fans that are not happy with that. Here's the thing with that being a possibility. I don't know if that's realistic for Kentucky. I don't know if it makes sense to put your 7-footer at your 3. But if he can do it and actually make it happen in a way that doesn't feel forced, I think most people should be in support of that. I think most people should be accepting of that being a thing for Kentucky. Why? Well, what have we talked about? What have we complained about with Kentucky? It's the lack of modernity, right? If that's the right way you say that word. I can't spell or pronounce anything. It's the lack of a modern offense. It's the lack of a modern player, I think, at different positions. Or even whenever you do get modern players, you try and force them into roles that they aren't in what people have described as, I'm not claiming it is, as in an archaic way. If you bring out a 7-footer and you put him at the 3 and tell him to shoot threes and handle the ball and do all these different things, people are going to eat that up. That's a unicorn. That's what you call a unicorn in college basketball, in basketball, period. That's like the Victor Wembanyama situation. He can pull threes. He can handle the ball. If you can get Aaron Bradshaw to do that at a smaller level for you, I mean, that's all. Not only is that fun to watch, but I also think it would end up being effective. If he can do it, this is all if he can do it. But the pushback again on this is I don't know if it will work because of the rotation. You have to think about what else Kentucky's getting here. So you've got Rob Dillingham, Reed Sheppard, and DJ Wagner in your backcourt, right? You've got your 1s and 2s there. Justin Edwards exists. The number 2 player in the country, the number 1 small forward in the nation at 6'7", 180 pounds. Wouldn't he be the guy at your small forward? Because if you end up putting Bradshaw at the 3 in certain lineups, is Edwards sliding down? Are you putting in Onyenso? And then where? Are you going a lineup where, and this makes me want to puke now I'm thinking about it, are you going with a lineup that has Bradshaw, Onyenso, and Ware all in at once? Does Damian Collins get in at the 4 and you just say, screw it, we're taller than you, and just you'd never play his own then? I know Kentucky would never play his own even with all that length on the floor, but I just don't know if rotationally that makes sense. And while it is exciting, you also have to look at the flip side of this, which is from a matchup standpoint, does doing that with Bradshaw make sense at any point in any game? Because while sure, the size is fun to watch on offense, defensively, what does that look like if he's slower? What does it look like whenever a 6'7" guy like Justin Edwards can blow by him and get to the rim? You have to be able to account for these things, and I'm sure that this coaching staff is. I'm not sitting here and saying anything revolutionary whenever I say, hey, maybe putting a 7-footer at your 3 is not the best idea from a matchup standpoint. Everyone has thought that before I have. I'm just pointing it out to you guys because while there is some excitement, while there is some pause with these comments, you have to just assess everything before you make a decision. So Kentucky right now has a small forward, right? And Chris Livingston has yet to declare for the NBA draft. If he doesn't and he comes back, you've got Edwards and Livingston. There's no way you try and play Bradshaw at your 3. With those 2 guys, you can't keep all 3 of them happy and put the center at your 3. I don't think that makes sense. And no, I don't think it makes sense if you put your 7-footer at your 3 and put Livingston at the 4. No, it doesn't make sense, I think, to keep Justin Edwards out of the loop. And he's not going to play combo guard. He's not going to play the 2/3. But in your rotation, you have to keep your 5 stars happy. But I don't think putting Bradshaw all the way up there is in an answer to what couldn't end up being a problem. So while it is fun, while I do appreciate the comments, while I think some of us will try and take it at face value and trust it, too many times I think Kentucky fans and fans in general have been bitten by coach speak and have been bitten by what players have said that coaches have told them. Because I think the majority of the time, whenever it comes to situations like this, and I don't know the words to describe it, but I think you understand what I'm saying. When it comes to situations like this where a player or a coach makes a statement in the offseason, most of the time, it does not come to fruition. Whenever you see something slightly outlandish or very outlandish, like, whoa, you're playing a 7-footer at your 3, it never really happens, right? Oscar Tshiebwe shooting threes. Whoa, your big man's going to shoot threes all of a sudden? No, he's not. Whoa, you're playing a more modern 5-out offense? Nope. You're not doing it. We saw it with Kentucky twice last year. So I'm not gonna bite the bullet on this one. I'm not gonna jump the gun and say that Bradshaw's starting at the 3 or he's gonna be even playing at the 3 at any point in any rotation. But putting him at the 4 seems like the right spot. And I think that will be fun to watch regardless. So if you've got any thoughts on that, you can leave it in the YouTube comments below, or you can hit me on the socials. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Again, you can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Again, questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the YouTube comments. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.